For those who did not hear, the question was, if we do need, in fact, a God to tell us right or wrong, which God?
Okay, let me make some distinctions here that are very important. My argument tonight was not that we need God in order to tell us what is right and wrong. That's a question of moral epistemology, which means your theory of knowledge. How do you know right and wrong? I don't think we need God to function as a source of moral knowledge. On the contrary, as a Christian, I think God's moral law is written on our hearts so that we have an instinctive grasp of the difference between good and evil. My argument is rather an argument of moral ontology, that is to say, what is real. And I'm arguing that you need to have God as a transcendent ground for the reality of moral values and duties, not for a knowledge of the moral values and duties that actually exist. Now, in answer to your question, I am a Christian theist, but my argument tonight is actually consistent with generic theism, any sort of theism that would hold to perfect being theology, that God is the greatest conceivable being and accords man immortality in the afterlife, and that would be consistent with Buddhism, or rather with Islam, with Judaism, Christianity, certain kinds of Hindu theism, perhaps some sort of deism. So my argument tonight is for concerns a kind of broad intersectarian view of God, though I myself am a Christian.
Were you ever in politics, Dr. Craig?
No.
You should. You should.
Thank you. I would like to.
That's exactly how a politician would answer that, right? In God we trust. Which God? All of them. All of them. Your God and my God. Let's get a big hug going here, right? But of course this is inconsistent. It cannot be all of them. There are very specific definitions to Dr. Craig's Christian God, from a Muslim God, from Hindu gods, from Aboriginal gods, from Norse gods and Roman and Greek gods and whatnot. So they're not all the same. So the moral ontology really doesn't fly here because he has a very specific understanding of a particular type of God, which has not yet come out of the closet tonight, but we know it's in there. And no such God has written any kind of moral law on my heart, not that I've been able to tell anyhow. And I've looked, and I was baptized and I was, raised a Catholic and whatnot. So I do know a bit about the Bible, but I find it deeply offensive, really, to talk about that kind of divisiveness of, generalizing gods, but we really know it has to do with a very specific type of God.
Thank you very much for that question. Now a question for Dr. diCarlo. For those who didn't hear, the question was, if God doesn't exist, who is to claim and what is right and wrong? And how can this person use the example of how can he claim genocide was right or wrong, or slavery was right or wrong?
Right. Yeah, it's something we're going to have to decide for ourselves. And as this gentleman's question addressed in the very start, which is a very good question, which is we should make an effort to try to come up with universal principles, if possible, or universal values, or values that are common to many different societies throughout the world. And I think if we look carefully, we are going to find that there are some basic ones. Generally, people do not like to be in discomfort or in pain. Masochists aside, generally speaking, we do not enjoy being in pain. And we generally try to avoid seeing ourselves and those we care for to be in discomfort or dismay or in pain. So what we can do is we can take that as a universal, say, okay, I don't like it. This is the golden rule, right? And don't forget, golden rule is not a Christian idea. It comes from biology. It is much older than any world religion, and it basically says the same thing. You wouldn't want to be treated that way. You don't want to be in discomfort and pain. You wouldn't want people practicing genocide or any atrocities on you or the ones you care for. What justifies you then in doing it to them? And that's something I think we can agree upon without the need for a transcendent anchor, as my colleague Dr. Craig maintains.
Okay. When Dr. diCarlo says we should try to look for universals. That word should already expresses a moral imperative. He's already leapt to the upper story in thinking that we have some sort of moral duty to seek for universals. The minute you hear someone use the word should or ought, your antennae should immediately go up, because then they're making some sort of a moral claim. And it seems to me that though we might be able to find common moral decencies among all cultures, in fact, these are still not objective right and wrong. As Paul Kurtz, the humanist philosopher, points out, he says, these just lay down moral imperatives necessary for group cohesion and survival. Individuals who abide by them are commended and praised. Those who flout them are condemned and blamed as immoral or evil. It's just a means of fostering group cohesion and cooperation. But there isn't any objectivity to these sorts of values. You see the same sort of altruism exhibited in a troop of baboons.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You're right.